You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and this week I've got two co-hosts. I've got a first-time, I've got a first-time co-host, and I've got a long-time co-host. But anyway, introducing the long-time co-host first, John Stevenson, the founder of Coaster101. John, welcome back to the Coaster101 podcast.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And we've got a first timer over here. So it's like the Halloween scene in Big Daddy. It's like, we got a first timer trick or treating. But yeah, Evan Sharp up in New Jersey. Evan is he's a contributing writer for us at Coaster101.com. And again, first time on the show. We're happy to have you, Evan.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we wanted to get the three of us together. Well, really the two of you, and then I'm just kind of here as background fodder, because all three of us recently, semi-recently, John as recently as this past week, Evan last month, me last fall, we've all taken a trip to a park that I think, when it gets really down to it in the Central Florida landscape, I feel like it might be forgotten, which is weird to say because this is an outstanding park. But it's Busch Gardens Tampa. And, you know, this is a park, it's got more than 60 years of history. The Busch Brewery, Anheuser-Busch Brewery, used to be on the property there. I learned this reading Wikipedia that where Gwazi stood, and now Iron Gwazi stands, is where the Anheuser-Busch Brewery was. So you learn something new every day. But Evan, again, it was your first visit when you visited last month. So I'm going to go ahead and start with you, bring you right in. What were your initial impressions of Busch Gardens Tampa?
I think that's a great question. I think my first instinct was if you took the best qualities of Animal Kingdom and just plopped a bunch of coasters in that area, that's kind of Busch Gardens Tampa in a nutshell. I think they do a really fantastic job with their animal enclosures there. And when you combine that with some world-class coasters, you really have a great park.
Yeah. And John, I know you had been to Busch Gardens Tampa, but it'd been a minute. You were there last in 2009. So I'm looking at RCDB right now, and there's 5 coaster credits that you did not have. So it's been a minute. What were your first thoughts upon walking in?
Yeah, I had a lot of catching up to do. So 15 years is quite a span of time. And you're right, there are several new credits, so I had a lot of catching up to do. For the most part, it seemed I've been there twice. I went in 2007 and then 2009, and so I was still fairly familiar with the makeup of the park, the layout. I kind of had to reacclimate myself, but overall, it was as great as I remember it being. Again, an incredible lineup. Of course, you've got Iron Gwazi and Cheetah Hunt, which were both amazing. So. Definitely felt like I was kind of reconnecting with an old friend who had kind of had a glow up, and it was a great 2 days there.
Well, John, you mentioned Cheetah Hunt and Iron Gwazi is great, but I want to talk about the coaster that opened in 2010 that you just missed during your last visit, and that was one of the coasters you rode very early in your trip, Air Grover. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording how you got your ride of shame out of the way pretty early.
Yes. So as the listeners may know, we were very, very close in our coaster counts, or have been in the past. And so I have no shame and will get every credit that I can, obviously without breaking any height restrictions. And so I had kind of already written off Air Grover just because I had a lot to see and do, but I was passing it and there was no one in line. So I saw my opportunity and took it. And it was fun. It was, nothing crazy, but a really great coaster for the young thrill seekers.
So you got a Zen ride on Air Grover. How great does that sound?
There were other people once I got there. Yeah. So it wasn't quite as that may have been, yeah, it was not a Zen ride.
Okay, fine. All right. So again, we've all been to this park. We've got experience with Busch Parks and SeaWorld parks as well. How do you guys think Busch Gardens Tampa kind of stacks up to, a park like Busch Gardens Williamsburg, or, heading an hour up I-4 to SeaWorld Orlando. How do you think Busch Gardens Tampa stacks up to the other parks in the United Parks and Resorts chain now? Evan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so being located in New Jersey, I wouldn't necessarily call Busch Gardens Williamsburg a home park, but it's definitely one that I frequent fairly often. And when they get a new attraction, it's one I definitely have on my bucket list to get to. Still haven't ridden Dark Coaster yet, but definitely looking to get there hopefully soon. But my most recent visit was 3 years ago with the addition of Pantheon, and I think that does a huge number for the park, especially with their coaster lineup. I think when you're looking at the top coasters at Busch Gardens Williamsburg compared to Busch Gardens Tampa, I think Williamsburg has the upper hand. I think Pantheon is a great ride, as well as Alpengeist and Griffin, and even their mid-tier coasters surpass Tampa as well. I think Verbolten is a much better ride than if you were to say Cobra's Curse. And then obviously you have the Tigris to Tempesto comparison, and then Apollo's Chariot. There's nothing like that at Busch Gardens Tampa.
That's true. I'll give you that. I'm looking at their list, and if we're gonna compare apples to apples here, I guess your Intamin like super thrilling coaster would be Cheetah Hunt, which I think is pretty underrated, but I would take Pantheon over it. For Bolton, I would take over Cobra's Curse. Kumba, I would. That's tough. Kumba, I think I would push with maybe Loch Ness Monster. I don't know. Montu and Alpengeist, they're both really good. Or maybe Scorpion, I'm comparing to Loch Ness Monster. Anyway, this is maybe another podcast episode where we just kind of go coaster by coaster and compare the best. But John, what about you? How do you think Busch Gardens Tampa stacks up to other parks in the United chain?
I definitely think it is superior to SeaWorld, although I have not been since it's been 14 years since I've been there. So I also owe SeaWorld a visit. I would say it's slightly above SeaWorld, but again, I've not been since Mako. So that might change my opinion. I would say it's pretty equal to Busch Gardens Williamsburg. It's so close because you have, obviously Pantheon, which I have not ridden, but you have Pantheon, but then Tampa has Gwazi, Loch Ness Monster. I mean, Drachenfire, I think, was supposed to be its equivalent to Kumba. And obviously that didn't happen. So I don't know. I feel like there's some imbalances there it's hard to gauge. I mean, I think they're both great parks. So I think right now I would give Tampa the edge, but that's also just because I went last weekend. So I really need to go back to Williamsburg in the very near future to get to kind of have a more accurate assessment.
That makes
They're both
sense.
Beautiful parks, though. Oh my gosh.
They're gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And, you can't talk about Busch Gardens Tampa without talking about, their newest up until, we're going to date this a little bit because Phoenix Rising opens Phoenix Rising opens later this year. Words are hard, guys.
Yeah, they are.
But Iron Gwazi, obviously the coaster opened in 2022, was supposed to open in 2020. I got my first ride on it last fall. Was in a train full of my buddies. I was there on my bachelor party. Some coaster fans, some non-coaster fans, and all of us loved it. And I was blown away. Unfortunately, I only got one ride because weather cut us short that day. But John, I'll start with you, then I'll go over to Evan. Iron Gwazi, what do you think?
It was everything I hoped it would be. I mean, the height alone. So the hotel that I was at was right across the street from the park, and I got there late Thursday night, and just seeing it, and it was lit up for Mardi Gras, the Mardi Gras festival, and just seeing how huge it was. I knew, it stands over 200 feet tall, but just seeing it in person, this massive structure, it's so imposing when you're entering the park too. It was incredible. I mean, I've ridden so many of these RMCs now, and they still manage to catch me off guard. And this one just had, the pacing was incredible. I've heard a lot of people complain about it being short. I personally didn't feel that way. I thought it was very an appropriate length. It obviously had a lot of energy kind of left to kill at the end, but I would kind of rather have that than one that sort of putters out. The death roll for me was the highlight. I mean, that was just the most insane. I still could not, I rode it a lot. I got very lucky. I would just go to it first thing, the 2 days that I went. It was incredible. I still cannot wrap my head around that element. I posted on X. I was like, this is what happens when I play No Limits 2. Like, there's just nothing about it that makes sense. And then the drop, the wave turn. I mean, it's such a great ride. It definitely met my high expectations.
Evan, what about you?
Oh man, I thought it was unbelievable. I mean, right off the bat, getting off that first ride, I knew that was my top coaster right there. That was my new number one. No doubts about it. I think I got 3 or 4 rides the day I was there, so it was pretty good to do it that many times without feeling like I exhausted it or exhausted myself. There was one ride, I think it was maybe the second ride I had, where I unfortunately left my sunglasses in my pocket, and that had a pretty hefty crack in it after I was done with the ride. So I think that actually shows the intensity right there. But it's also like what you were saying, when you have non-coaster fans, non-coaster riders, I think it really goes a long way with that crowd as well, especially when you have a ride that they've probably never seen before and just so many iconic elements. Like John was saying, that drop is just so imposing, and then once you're on it, it's unbelievable to fly out of your seat and look straight down. I think a highlight for me was the wave turn over the station, and how that it happens so late into the ride, but it has that pace as if it just went after the first drop.
So yeah, I think we're at a point with RMC where they're just making up names for their elements. Yeah. And the death roll, which is kind of like the barrel roll drop on like Twisted Timbers or Storm Chaser.
Mm-hmm.
That's yeah. I always get the Kentucky Kingdom coasters confused because they're all all weather names. Yep. Anyway, but like you said, that death roll, the wave turn, that beyond vertical drop, they're absurd in the best way possible. And I think they hit a home run with Iron Gwazi because the train looks good. It's right there in the center of the park where everything, you can see it from everywhere. It blew me away. And I think, Evan, you called it your number one. John, I you're maybe guilty of a little recency bias here, but where does it fall for you? For me personally, it's 3. So it's behind Fury and it's behind Velocicoaster.
But yeah, Velocicoaster has become my number one. I would say it's that's tough. It is getting tougher to rank them. It's definitely a top 10 for me. Evan and I actually were at Wildcats Revenge Media Day last year, and that was another one that it blew me away and surprised me, I guess, because it was smaller and I wasn't expecting as much. So these RMCs are becoming so hard to rank, and then you add them into all the others, other coasters that I've ridden. So I'll have to kind of let that, it's still so fresh. Like you said, got that recency bias. So I'll have to think on it, let it kind of marinate for a little while.
That was a really good non-answer. So I congratulate you there. So in addition to Iron Gwazi and the aforementioned Air Grover, there are 7 other roller coasters at Busch Gardens Tampa. And Evan, I know when you visited, I think SheiKra was down or closed for the day. But what were some other highlights? I'll start with you because we can eliminate SheiKra. What were some other coaster highlights for you during your visit?
I would say my sleeper pick was Kumba. I think that ride, it's stuck in the back of the park. It doesn't get the love that it receives. I know it's one of the most photogenic coasters in the world with that corkscrew through the land over there. But just the way that runs and its age, the age doesn't show at all. I think it's a really smooth ride. It has a little bit of a rattle, but nothing to write home about. but just the way that ride really sizes up its elements and just uses the landscape to its advantage. I don't think I've experienced a B&M with that many tunnels, so that was a great thing to see. But I mean, Montu definitely should get the love that it deserves. I think it probably is the best invert out there. I posted a thing when I was there on X that it was an underrated invert, and that got a lot of slack. So I wanted to remedy that and say that it is probably the best invert out there.
It is a very, very good invert. I will tell you, and again, at the park with a bunch of dudes in their 30s who are, not as young as we all used to be. Montu was one and done for a lot of our group, and for a couple of my buddies, ended up being the last ride they rode all day, just because it kicked their ass a little bit. Like, it just, I have one friend, he got off and was like so lightheaded he had to like lay down, and I don't think he was being dramatic, but it's Montu. It'll rip you around for sure. And I feel like Kumba's the same way. I did not ride Kumba on my most recent trip, just because I had ridden it a couple of years prior, and we were short on time. The weather wasn't great, all that good stuff. But yeah, I think Kumba and Montu, for being 31 and 28 years old as of this year, that's obscene to me how good those two coasters are. John, what about you? I think I might know where you're going with this, if you have a coaster highlight.
I've always been partial to SheiKra. I rode it in 2007 on my first visit there. It's back when the train still had floors, so I rode it right before it closed for the conversion to the floorless trains. I've always had such a special place in my heart for SheiKra. I followed it so closely when it was being constructed. I remember the day it was announced. I was so fascinated because it was the first B&M dive coaster in the U.S. and I loved how they built it into the Stanleyville section of the park. I mean, it looks like it's been there forever. The water, the splashdown element, the way that everything is so visible and easy for onlookers to see. That was kind of my one, not complaint, but I wish it was easier to kind of see Iron Gwazi up close. You kind of see it from a distance and only certain pieces. So I love how interactive SheiKra is with the crowd. I love that first drop. It's re-rideable, which, going back to Montu, I agree. Montu is definitely, I got to take a water break in between rides on that. Same with Kumba to an extent. And SheiKra, I think I could just stay on it all day and never get off, just maybe switch seats. The theming of the area, I mean, it's just the entire coaster. I've always been a huge fan, and I prefer it to Griffin at Busch Gardens Williamsburg for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you went a totally different direction from where you were whenever I was thinking you were going.
Yeah.
Because you keeping me guessing, but I gotta, while we're here, since nobody brought it up, I gotta give Cheetah Hunt its flowers, because that coaster, to me, with its multiple launches, that one inversion, the windy S curves through the caves and through the water, that is a coaster I could ride all day. And I love that ride so much. I think people sleep on it. And I think, John, you put on what I'm going to refuse to call X. I'm going to call it Twitter, because that's the website it is to me. I think you put on that website that Cheetah Hunt walked so Velocicoaster could run. And I think somebody jumped in the comments and were like, Cheetah Hunt, or they threw Maverick in there too, which I kind of agree. It's that Intamin Blitz coaster, but it's so good for being just, fairly simple with one inversion, but speed and terrain of that coaster's high points, and not talked enough about. So
I agree. I enjoyed it. No complaints. Amazing ride. I think it suffers from, like I said, Velocicoaster is my number one. So I think having that, going in with that expectation, obviously I knew it wasn't going to be a Velocicoaster, but I think it was really fun. I loved how it interacts with the scenery, but it just didn't have that kind of that spark that Velocicoaster. And two, riding it after Iron Gwazi, I mean, anything is going to be tame but I agree. It's one I could just stay on all day. I love the theming. I love how it uses the park's former monorail station. The water, I love. So Mike, Coaster101 Mike, was there with me for part of the visit, and I told him, I was like, I love, one of my favorite parts of that coaster is being able to smell the chlorinated water that you're going over, because it takes me back to, to old dark rides and Disney World dark water rides, and so I think that was another one of my favorite parts of the coaster, which I was not expecting.
John, you're an interesting cat. It's like, yeah, why do you ride this coaster? Because I can smell the chlorinated water.
Well, it's like it's saying it gets you so close to it. Like you feel like you can just hold your arm out and just kind of skim the water.
That's fair. Okay, I'll give it to you. Evan, do you have any cheetah hunt thoughts? Do you ride it for the smell?
Not for the smell. That now that I think about it, no. Absolutely not.
Okay, fair enough. All good. What about non-coaster rides? I know, Busch Gardens Tampa, they've got their fair share of flats. They've got some transport rides. John, I know you got on Falcon's Fury for the first time.
Ooh, Falcon's Fury. That one made me sweat. I wasn't gonna ride it because those were the ones that still make me sweat, make me a little uneasy. I was like, you know what? If it's like, I'll just pass it. I'll be okay. That's not why I'm here. And sure enough, I walk. It was closed for most of Friday. It was very, very windy, so a lot of the rides were open and closing due to based on how windy it was. So it was closed, I think, all day Friday. So Saturday, I didn't have a full day at the park, so I really kind of was on a mission to get as many rides on Gwazi and Cheetah Hunt and all the coasters. And I walked by, and there was barely a single person in line. So I was like, "You have no excuse not to try this." And I did. It's the same feeling that I get when I'm riding in a B&M Flyer. That feeling where you're like being completely held in by these restraints when you're at the top and you're staring down at the ground, and you're just really hoping that it is working, like the restraints are working like they're supposed to work. But it was so fun. I was actually going to get back and try to ride it again, but again, it was just kind of up and down all day, and the day just kind of got away from me. But what a terrifying ride! I miss that feeling of being that anxious before a ride.
So you're telling me the drop tower was up and down all day?
It was. You should host a podcast.
I'm here with the humor. How's the elevator business? It has its ups and downs. What about you, Evan? Did you get a ride on Falcon's Fury? I know it's kind of hit or miss if it's open or closed. Or
so it was down for the morning when I was there, and then I made my way over to the park, and all of the doubts that filled John's head consumed mine. And the drop towers are not my thing. They're the only, I can go on any coaster, doesn't matter, but when it comes to that free fall, I can't do it. And I stood under Falcon's Fury for probably a good 10 minutes debating whether or not I should get on it, and I opted not to. And I think I regret my decision, just given how unique that ride is. But at the end of the day, just drop towers aren't it for me.
I hear you. I liked it a lot. Again, it was another one I did not get to on my most recent trip. I rode it last in 2019 when I was there last. So I love the feeling of just being straight down, staring straight down. They pull your feet up and then they kind of swing you out. It is a weird sensation for sure, but I definitely get, if you're not a drop tower person, I absolutely not. Like my buddies who I was at the park with, they were looking at me and they said no, but there were 4-letter words that are not podcast friendly that they were saying. I was like, "You guys want to ride this?" And it was blank no, and rhymes with duck. Anyway, what about the? I tell you what, I really enjoyed during my trip, and it may have just been because of the narrator I had, was the park's train, and it's got a Serengeti Express is the name. It's one of these big park steam trains, multiple stops, but with Busch Gardens Tampa, it kind of goes back through the Serengeti plains, and you kind of see a lot of the animals. It's almost like the Kilimanjaro safaris at Animal Kingdom, but you're in a train as opposed to a safari. And I will never forget the narrator we had. He was having way too much fun with his job, and he was like, every time he would see an animal, he's like, "These are the gazelles, and here they are. They're eating a salad with no dressing." And like instead of just eating leaves. And he said that like 4 or 5 times for different animals that were eating. It was always salad, no dressing. And then he would see Busch Gardens ambassadors, I believe is their preferred term. They're working, and he'd point them out, and he'd go, "And here they are doing their job with no complaints." And it's just the no complaints thing kept coming up. But the one thing I will always forever ever stick with me. The train rolls by Montu, and he goes, "This coaster's called Montu, or as I call it, Mananana Tutu." And he's like, and it gets everybody to chant Mananana Tutu. And it was, again, having way too much fun with his job, or it was just like, I'm so tired of the script. Help me, get me out of here.
Hey,
Little column A, little column B, but he was on it, and that made that train ride so fun for me.
props to him, because ours was straight reading off of a script, and the highlight of mine was a very large, I think rhino, hippo, I don't know, taking a very large bowel movement, like right in front of the train. I mean, the entire train was just like screaming, because it was it was the most graphic thing I have ever seen at an amusement park, and it will haunt me until the day I die. And but I won't forget it. And you know what? Props to them and that's what happens when you go to a zoo. So I mean, that is a great example of you are in the wild at Busch Gardens Tampa.
All right, Evan, any big train memories? Did you get on it? Is it memorable for you at all? Because I've got a great story. John's got a great story for a different reason.
I wish I did, because I feel like if I got on it, I would have had a story based on what you guys had to say.
But
I tried to get on it earlier in the day, but I wanted to make my way around the park on my own 2 feet, and then I got to the station located next to Serengeti Flyer, and it was closed. And at that point, it was 4:00. The park closed at 6, and I said, "There's no shot they're going to open this with 2 hours left." No. So unfortunately, did not experience the eventful train rides that you guys had.
No Mananana Tutu or Mananana Dudu. So, excuse me. You mentioned Serengeti Flyer. Did either of you ride that?
Yeah.
Okay, Evan, what'd you think?
I thought it was fantastic. Those rides bring such a childlike joy to me. I don't think I laughed so hard on any other ride besides those. I've done Serengeti Flyer, I've done Finnegan Flyer at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and John, you can probably know the one at Dollywood because you're there like every day.
Yep. Barnstormer.
Yep. Yeah, so I think those are fantastic, especially this one. I think this one had easily the best view of probably any ride in the park, I think, just given its proximity to the Serengeti itself. And when we boarded, there was the ride op, and he said, to your left is the Serengeti, to your right is the elephants. And I just thought that was like the coolest intro to a ride, just like how close it is to all these animals.
That's awesome. Yeah, I rode Finnegan's Flyer when it opened 2018, 2019. The last 4 years they all run together, so fairly recently, but also kind of in the distance. And yeah, I think those S&S Scream and Swings, they're a ton of fun. They're perfect for a park guest who wants kind of that thrill, but isn't going to do something like Falcon's Fury. Falcon's Fury? Yeah, Falcon's Fury. I'm going to get that and Falcon's Flight confused forever now. But yeah, I think they're a ton of fun. Another one that I did not ride, just because we never really made our way over to that, very tight section of the park. That's I feel like it's tucked away a little bit. But yeah. And Evan, when you were there, had the Skyride reopened yet? I know this is a fairly recent development. And so no Skyride for you. There was no Skyride for me last fall. John, as a fun card holder, you did not have to pay the $5, but you did ride the Skyride.
I did. I rode half of it. Like I said, so it was very windy on Friday and Saturday. And so I think the Skyride was closed all day Friday. I don't believe it ever opened. And then Saturday, I got very lucky and I had just gotten off Shikra and was in the Stanleyville section of the park and walked past the station, and it had just opened. So I got on. I was prepared to pay $5, but I guess because I'm a fun card holder, I got on for free and rode half of it. And it was amazing. I could have stayed on there all day, literally spent an entire day just riding the Skyride back and forth because you get such a great view of the park. Got to the section in Edge of Africa, shares the building with Cheetah Hunt. The line was so long. I was like, well, that was my one ride for the day. And then it ended up closing a short time later because of the wind. So I was hoping to make a round trip, but I was so glad just to get the one way. The views are unprecedented. It's amazing.
It rolls, or like sky rolls. It's the sky roller is I think the industry term, or the sky buckets or whatever. It rolls right by kind of those airtime hills on the back half of Cheetah Hunt. So you get some pretty great views for sure.
The train flew right over me. It was incredible.
There you go.
You just got to time it just right.
So, I want to ask you guys, when you were there, I mean, every park visit, I think, may or may not, depending on how great of a day you have, it may have some challenges. Was there anything that was like, oh, I can't believe this happened, despite, or if a ride was down or whatever? Were there any challenges you guys had during your visit? Evan, I'll go with you. I've got one in mind that I'm going to tell you guys the story after I get your answers. But Evan, you go first, then John, you go.
Yeah, I mean, from the well, okay, so this was an interesting thing. So I pulled up to the parking gate, and the attendant says to me, so I think it's $35 is the going rate for general parking. So the woman says to me, she says, you can pay the $35 for general parking with card, or if you want preferred parking, it's $20 cash. So that was a no-brainer right there, just to fork over the $20. So that was a good start to the day, and something that I wasn't expecting. And then when I started my day, Iron Gwazi was first on my list. I was the third person in line, and they let us enter the park a few minutes before it opened at 10, and it got to about 10:30, and they were still going through their initial test runs, so I kind of had to pivot from there and made my way towards Cheetah Hunt and that side of the park by Cobra's Curse and Montu. So I hit a few rides there, but definitely was a letdown not letting Gwazi be my first ride of 2024.
Evan, I'm gonna stop you real quick. Busch Gardens Tampa is a cashless park, so I'm betting that $20 might have just gone in somebody's pocket. And I'm not trying to dox anybody here, but that's what I'm thinking happened. Anyway, John, what about you?
Oh, I just realized Iron Gwazi was my first ride of 2024. Interesting. Okay. None of mine were really issues with the park. I mean, there, you have a few, slow operations, just general things at a theme park. I was really impressed for the most part. All the ride ops were very efficient. I guess my biggest complaint, this is very much there were, I think, Kumba and Montu both had one train operations, which I feel bad complaining at all, because this is technically off season for a lot of regional park or even, year round parks. So they have to do maintenance on these coasters. And so, I had to wait a little longer for Montu, and Kumba never has that long of a line. But other than that, I really cannot. I mean, the wind was the biggest headache, and obviously Busch Gardens Tampa can't control that. So I really weren't any major headaches. I stayed across the street at one of the hotels across the street, so I used the shuttle. I do think the $35 parking is a little wild, but that's just, the sign of the times. So yeah, nothing really sticks out to me as any major issues that I had. So that says a lot about the park.
It does. And yeah, we had a great day when I visited last fall. I did mention the weather was not our friend, but it's also, Florida during the fall where it rains literally every day and thunderstorms every other day. We were on the River Rapids ride and there was a storm rolling in. We, I think, were the last raft to go off the River Rapids ride, and then they shut the ride down. And they're not loading anybody, but they have to unload the people ahead of us. So we sat down at the bottom of that hill as a thunderstorm was rolling in, sitting in the water ride. And I'm sure they were working as fast and efficiently as possible, but there was a point where I was looking at my buddies and I was like, if there's a thunderstorm coming, we should probably get out of the water ride. So that was my one thing. And again, they got us out safely. Nobody got hurt. Nobody died. It was all good. But that was just one thing to me that was like, huh, this is interesting. But yeah, no real challenges, no real, again, outside of the weather, which we can't control. And if we could, we're in the wrong business for sure. John, I did notice when you were at the park, you were asking, because I know you try to keep mostly vegetarian except for the odd cheeseburger here or there.
Yeah.
Did you ever find your vegetarian meal?
I had cheese pizza. So there were people replied to me, and there was a Beyond Burger towards the front of the park. I didn't get to it just because, again, I was kind of on a mission, especially on Saturday, and so it was fine. I am sure if I had looked harder, and I'm sure there were salads and things, but time was so precious for both of those days that I really was I was more out of curiosity. So I think parks in general could do a better job of catering to more types of dietary restrictions, and but again, very, very minor. Apparently there's a really good vegan place across the street, which I wish I could have tried if I had had more time there.
That was what a lot of people were saying on X/Twitter.
Yeah.
So, Evan, what about you? Did you have a go-to meal in the park that was particularly memorable?
Yeah, I made it my mission to get to Trapper's Smokehouse. So that was definitely a highlight right there. Line took a little bit longer than I would have liked to, especially I was there on a Wednesday in January, and it also was the same day probably the local YMCA was visiting, where there was a lot of people over 60 years old in line. So it was definitely a struggle to let them choose their meals option from that buffet line. So definitely had to wait a couple minutes there. But the food was phenomenal. I think that was probably the best set of theme park ribs I ever had.
Yeah, I think the smokehouses, you can never really go wrong. Sorry, John. I know you're mostly.
Is that the one by Shikra?
Yeah.
Yep. You can smell it. that turn before the splashdown, you get a good whiff of that barbecue.
Yes. So when I was there, we just stopped for a quick snack and a beverage. I had the giraffe-shaped pretzel at the Giraffe Bar, which was served with a beer cheese. It was pretty good.
How was did you have the pretzel in Pantopia? There was a pretzel place.
I did. I had the bacon twist pretzel, which was
What did you think?
Phenomenal. But not as good as the pretzels at Busch Gardens Williamsburg across from Verbolten.
Ooh, okay.
Das und Breslin und Bier, or whatever it's called. Pretzels and beer in English, or in German rather. But yes, that place, the pretzel nuggets and the beer mustard, chef's kiss, 10 out of 10 in Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. I did not try the Pantopia pretzel, but I do remember when that place was being opened, like my first ever interview that I ever did. I'm going to date myself here. This is back January of 2014 for Coaster101. The Busch Gardens was opening Pantopia. Pantopia had just opened. They were working on Falcon's Fury, and my interview was with Jeff Hornick, who was, just at the park. Now he's in corporate. And I interviewed him again at Dark Coaster Media Day, and I was like, wow, this is full circle. But yeah, I've always, I think Busch Parks or United Parks, they do the smokehouse concept really well, be that Trapper Smokehouse or Busch Gardens Williamsburg or Zambia Smokehouse. I don't know what the one at SeaWorld Orlando is called, but again, they all kind of have that same menu, and they're all really good. And they do the handmade pretzels really, really well. So those are the two things. And I think as a park that has kind of like a beer drinking history. You have a beer, you have a soft pretzel. It's a winning combination in my book. I want to ask you guys if you had a tip for a first time visitor, what would your biggest piece of advice be for a Busch Gardens Tampa first time visitor? John, I'll start with you.
Splurge on quick queue. I know especially if you're going on in the off season on a weekend, just because, like I said, one train operations. Definitely Iron Gwazi first. That's kind of a no brainer. Try to get on the Skyride. Those are my three tips, but definitely quick queue if you can swing it.
Evan, what about you?
I would say probably it's kind of obvious, but if you're a coaster lover, it's not. Um, make the animals a priority. I think that's a very unique aspect of the park, and they're kind of easy to miss if you're not specifically
Mm-hmm.
going in that direction. I know it's right between Serengeti Flyer and Cheetah Hunt, and they do offer two routes that you can go, and you see different animals on each of them, but they are kind of out of the way if that isn't your priority. But I think it's just such a cool offering, and factoring into the price of admission, that's $20 that you would pay for a zoo. So just going there is worth half your ticket.
Yeah. I we actually we were getting off Cheetah Hunt and they were getting ready to do kind of the cheetah speed run demonstration kind of right over there. That was really cool to see, even though I didn't get a great view of it. But they showed kind of how the cheetah tracked the prey and they set up this like flywheel system. It was really cool to see. But yeah, the animal habitat's definitely um, that's something definitely not to be missed. I think Busch Gardens Tampa is I believe is Florida's second largest zoo behind Animal Kingdom and bigger than Zoo Tampa, which is right around the corner, basically. So definitely worth checking out the animals there. I'm going to go on the opposite end of John's quick queue tip, though. If you can swing it, and this has been my experience the last couple of times, and I went it was sort of in the fall, so your mileage may vary here, but go on a weekday if you can stomach the one train operations. The crowds during the week will be nothing like they are on a Friday or Saturday. And I mean, even when we went, it was a Friday afternoon in either late August or early September. I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was September. So it was like middle of September. So kids are back in school, but the park is open, and pretty much everything was open at that point. So if you can go on a weekday and your travel plans allow for that, there's the 365-day parks when kids are in school, unless it's Disney because it's always busy at Disney. I think those are your biggest, your best days to go. I feel like because
That's
go ahead, John.
that's what I was thinking. But Friday, man, it was crowded. I mean, it cleared out towards the end of the day, but when it started raining, but it was it was definitely more crowded than I was anticipating. But
I think if I'm not mistaken, and somebody listening to this can correct me, I know a lot of schools up like towards New York, they had last week off. Like they have the President's Week, and not Shane, Evan. Sorry, you guys are both from New Jersey. You kind of have the short haircut. I'm losing my mind. It's okay. Evan, you're kind of nodding as somebody who's up from that neck of the woods. Is that President's Week kind of like a winter break that a lot
Yeah,
of people
it's
are
like
traveling?
the winter break part two. So here in Jersey, I think they just get either the Monday or Friday off, and that's kind of it. But New York, for whatever reason, gets that entire week off. So that's definitely a huge week for them to go to Florida, visit some grandparents.
interesting.
And there are a lot of people from New Jersey and New York who have migrated south to Florida. So there's probably a little bit of credence to that. But if you could have delayed it a week, John, I think you would have been fine. But I you know I'm glad you have the tip for the quick queue though, because that it was a solid tip. You're nodding at me. You're like, I wish I still had my $110.
No, yesterday because I had to leave around 5 to get to the airport, so I fully am I satisfied with
Okay.
the time it saved me. So
Did you see the giant flamingo in the Tampa airport? That thing's crazy.
I did not, because I was running to my gate because
Oh.
I pushed it way too close.
Well, okay. Anyway, Tampa Airport, giant flamingo in its like central atrium area. So
Gosh,
check.
now I got to go back. But hey, the fun card I think is valid till the end of 2024. So if anybody wants to go back, just holler.
Okay. If you're listening to this podcast and want to hang out with John, our Twitter DMs or
You can go smell the water with me.
on second thought, don't talk to John. We don't want we don't need this. Before we wrap this up, guys, any final thoughts about Busch Gardens Tampa? Anything we missed? Any final thoughts, piece of advice, anything you want to talk about?
I'm really excited for Phoenix Rising. I've never ridden a family B&M before, so I think it's going to be a fun ride. But I'm very excited to see what their next big coaster is.
Yeah, I think that will definitely fit really nicely into the coaster lineup itself, because I feel like it kind of fits that Cobra's Curse and Scorpion genre. But then after that, you have Tigris, which is probably the next step up, and then after that, you get to the really big ones, the Kumbas and Montus of the park. So I think that's definitely a really nice addition that they're going to have right there.
Yeah, I didn't even, for whatever reason, I didn't even think about it because it is opening later this year. It's John, when you were there, based on the photos, it looked like a pile of dirt.
Those footers, yeah. I'll be posting. It'll probably be out by the time this podcast is published. But yeah, there will be photos on the website, mostly just footers. But I think, was it you who saw a piece of the track en route?
No, I've never been that lucky. I think it might have been Nick or somebody.
Okay.
But again, we had the picture on Twitter of a presumably from the Claremont Steel Factory in Ohio, blue coaster track headed south. So it's looks like it's B&M. We think it was for Phoenix Rising based on the track coming into the park, and there was a staging area kind of near there. So I'm excited. I think, again, with what United Parks in the last couple of years, specifically in its Florida parks, has been doing with coasters, I'm excited that they continue to build more exciting new coasters and kind of stepping into that family genre a little bit. So I think Phoenix Rising will be great. Cool. Anything else, guys?
Can't wait to go back.
All right, good deal.
Go on Iron Gwazi as soon as possible.
Yeah. If you haven't ridden it yet, it is spectacular. And this is coming from someone who has a love-hate relationship with RMCs, because sometimes I fit, sometimes I don't fit. And fortunately, I fit, and man, like John said, it lived up to every single solitary bit of the hype. So if you're listening, have not been down to Busch Gardens Tampa in 15 years like John, in a couple of years like me, or in like a month like Evan, get down there. It's a great park, great time, and I can't wait for Phoenix Rising to open later this year. So awesome. Well, John, Evan, thank you for joining us for the first time. We'll have to have you back. John, after you stop smelling the bathwater of the theme park attractions, we'll have you back on.
It's clean bathwater.
You say so. Anyway, it's going to be an audio highlight of this. It's clean bathwater. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster101 podcast. If you're listening, make sure you're also reading. We have a website, coaster101.com. We're also on all forms of social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever Twitter's calling itself these days. We're at Coaster101 anywhere you can consume social media, so go check us out there. If you're listening, also, we love likes, ratings, reviews, anything on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I think, are the places where you can rate podcasts these days. So 5-star ratings. I got to give a shout out to Tyler, and there was one other one. It was Andrew from Park Rovers. They both said on Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter, this past week that the podcast, they were satisfied listeners who'd been listening since day one after our Silver Dollar City episode a couple weeks ago. So thank you to those guys, because that makes me feel good. And if you keep me feeling good, we'll get more episodes of this podcast. We'll bring Evan back. We'll bring John back. It's going to be a great time. So again, 5-star reviews and ratings. If you're looking for Coaster101 merch, head to c101.co/tpublic. We've actually got an Iron Gwazi inspired design on our website that I may have created, and I don't know if it's a copyright infringement or not, but artistic freedom or something, right? I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, and go check out our Instagram and look at the very interesting AI generated Iron Gwazi art that you can purchase at the gift shop.
Somebody said that was concept art, like from 2019, that they just put on a poster.
They did, yes. I went back and looked, and that was the concept art, which it also was probably AI generated. It's interesting. I regret not buying it, honestly.
I think Busch Gardens has a shop too, so you might have to go online and see if they've got it.
Yeah.
But last but certainly not least, you're getting ready to hear it now, but the theme music for this podcast, ever since episode 1, has come from Justin Mabry and JMMD Entertainment. They do great work, have some great shows coming up, so check them out as well. But John, Evan, this was fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Andrew.
And we will talk to y'all again soon.